class at primary level and by year group at secondary level. They won't have to wear face masks, but teachers are already scratching their heads about how they keep students socially distanced in corridors, at home time and at break times. The government says each school will be given a small number of testing kits, but didn't specify how many. We can speak now on Times Radio to Simon Kidwell, who's head of Hertford Manor Primary in Cheshire and executive member of the National Association of Head Teachers. Simon, welcome to the programme. First of all, have you got a plan in place? How many pupils are you talking about and how are you going to cope? I would have thought class time is relatively straightforward or more straightforward than movement around the school building.
Yes, so we've got 420 children on roll at our school, but we have been open for pupils, and this week we've had 210 children in school. So we're just over 50% of our cohort working in school. So the plans we put in place are going to be enhanced when we start again in September. So, for example, at the beginning and ends of days, we've stretched the start times so that children come in a more managed area. In terms of start times as well, we've made sure that children have the flexibility to come in over a 20-minute period, and we've opened 2 entrances to the school rather than 1. So that's worked really well. We've also staggered our lunch times and made sure that children are working in smaller groups at lunchtime. So in terms of opening in September, we feel we've already made a great start because we've got all year groups in at the moment, but we're only operating at 50% capacity, and we can see that we can scale those things up for September.
What do you make of the guidance? Is it explicit enough for you?
I think the guidance brings together a lot of guidance. We've had over 30 pieces of guidance over the last few months, and it does bring all those things together. I think there's some good things in the guidance. I think the hierarchy of things that we have to do to keep children safe, which include making sure that people who are showing symptoms don't come into school, making sure that we have lots of good hand washing going on, making sure that we have good respiratory hygiene, and also additional cleaning going on. So all those things are very clear that we can put these things in place. I think it's also good that the government have recommended that we continue having a broad and balanced curriculum. But there are some things in there which are challenging. And I think for schools which have only got 6% of children coming in, so for example, our secondary schools, we've had very low numbers coming in, there's an awful lot of work to do, because schools like mine, which have been open for now 4 to 5 weeks, have already done quite a lot of the legwork and making sure those risk assessments work, and we've been able to tweak them.
Well, there's also, from my looking at some of the guidance, there's also quite a lot of things they want you to do where they add the caveat where possible.
Yeah, I've counted those up, Phil, actually, and there's 13 caveats of where possible in the document. I mean, in some ways, that's a good thing, because we know the previous guidance wasn't, it didn't align with the government's ambitions. I know the unions have been blamed for not reopening schools, but to be honest, it's the guidance which has not allowed us to fully reopen. When I've been limited at 15 in a class, it was always technically impossible for me to fully reopen for all of our pupils. So the where possible does give us some professional flexibility. So it is important that we have those so we can actually interpret the guidance for our own individual settings.
How many testing kits will you have?
Don't know. I don't know. I mean, testing's been quite accessible in our area, so I know that people who've gone off for tests in the Cheshire area have been able to get them. But having some tests in school that we can give to parents that can't drive to Manchester Airport, which is one of our local testing stations, will be welcome as well. But we'll have to make sure they've got proper training on how to deliver those tests, because I would imagine taking a swab of a wriggly 4-year-old is going to be quite challenging.
Talking of those wriggly 4-year-olds, I'm the father of one and he's due to start in September. How are you going to make your 4-year-olds feel comfortable and welcome, given the social distancing measures you'll have to implement in a building that they've never been in before?
Well, firstly, I mean, the guidance is very clear that social distancing between children isn't expected, and that's been the case for a number of weeks, Phil. So we've not even tried to do that with the children. Our reception children have been back in already.
Sorry, let me clear up what I mean. What I mean is you'll still have to keep them in bubbles, won't you?
Yeah, we keep them in bubbles, absolutely, and we'll still keep looking at those. But in terms of social, they've been able to interact with each other. So we had a meeting with parents last night. We had 60 parents on the Zoom meeting last night where we gave them some of the things that we're doing. We've also got a lot of our children go to our nursery anyway, so they're familiar with the setting. We've also given an opportunity to talk to me or the deputy head if they've still got anxieties about starting in September. And we've also got opportunities for the children to attend the setting before September, because My experience is when children have come back, they have been anxious on the first day back in, and children have been quite concerned. But actually, school feels like a school, and once they've actually spent a day in the environment, they skip into school the next day. So I'm sure that we can go and talk to the parents and address their anxieties and talk about the measures we're putting in place.
I mean, the flip side to this, and I would love your view on this as an educator, is that our next door neighbour is 6 and she's been back at school. And I've never seen her happier in the last 3 months. And there is a mental health benefit to being amongst their peers that they've missed out on for the last 3 months.
Absolutely. I've seen children beaming. I've seen children who don't particularly, maybe not always skip into school. I think teaching is a social activity. Children are social beings. And I've been delighted with the way the children have interacted and the joy they've had of being back in a school setting. And I think that's the experience of your neighbour is replicated across the country. And there is a balance between balancing the risk of children being continuing off school and the risks of opening. And we know that the risks of children is very small.
Let me just finally ask you then, what happens in September if everyone comes back, you start to see a spike in cases even within your school community, but the government maintain this mandatory line? What will you do?
Well, in the new guidance, Phil, it's actually if we do get some cases in the community, it's up to the local public health officials to make those decisions around schools. Clearly, parental confidence in my school is very high at the moment because we've had no outbreaks, we've had no cases in the school community. So once we get that, that's going to test confidence again. But I think it's welcome that those public health officials are going to give the clear guidance on whether we then go and isolate a bubble, we isolate a year group, or we isolate the whole school. So that's what we'll have to do. That decision's almost been taken away from school leaders because the new guidance says that public health officials will make that decision.
Are you okay with that, or would you rather that be your decision?
I think it's a partnership decision. I think clearly I want to make sure that they've got the very best advice possible. I know some of the advice we had pre-lockdown when schools were getting cases was inconsistent. So I'm hoping they've ironed all those things out and we can get a consistent approach around what schools should do if we get an outbreak. And of course, that's reliant on test and trace being absolutely first class.
Very good to get your insight, Simon. Thank you for making time for us.
Thank you, Phil.
Simon Kidwell, head of Hertford Manor Primary in Cheshire, not a million miles away from where I'm broadcasting to you from tonight in the heart of Manchester, an executive member of the National Association of Head Teachers. Sian Griffiths is education editor at the Sunday Times and was listening to that. How do you think that compares, Sian, to some of the antipathy we've heard from teaching unions and other head teachers today?
Hi, Phil. Well, I thought Simon sounded like an amazing head teacher, sounds incredibly organised. I'd be really happy if my child was going to his school. I mean, he sounds like, he's already 50% of the way there with getting pupils back to his school. It's quite a small school, so that helps, I think. But seemed very, very on top of the guidance and very positive about the way forward. I think that contrasts with some of the statements we've heard today from other teaching unions. The National Education Union, quite worried about this guidance. Likewise, the Association of School and College Lecturers, which is another senior leaders union, another head teachers union, also, really some quite negative things they were saying about some of the rules. So, yeah, it's a mixed picture out there.
It was the tone of it, one of the issues the teaching unions had. Did they feel it felt heavy-handed to be issuing a mandatory, you are all going back in September in full uniform?
Yes, I think so. They didn't like that. They didn't like the idea that parents might be fined if they don't send their children into school. This whole question of, you will come back in school uniforms, because some schools have not been insisting on school uniform. They've been saying, come in, any clothes that you like, and the key thing is wash them when you get home on a high wash, on a high temperature, and come back in clean clothes in the morning, to kill any risk of the virus. And now we're getting guidance which says, no, come in school uniform, it doesn't have to be washed. And I think some unions are thinking, well, what's the priority here? Keeping children safe or making sure they look smart? They're not sure. But I think one of the things that the unions are worried about is this idea in secondary schools in particular that you can have bubbles that are as big as, 200 children, an entire year group. And if that is your bubble, how do you manoeuvre that around a school and keep it away from other bubbles? It's quite difficult to imagine. So yeah, I think some of the teaching unions still worried about the future and about September. I'm not completely convinced by this guidance.
No. And I think everybody who's a parent who's gone through lockdown period just appreciates teachers even more now, Sian, don't you?
Oh, my goodness, yes. I mean, absolutely. I mean, parents who thought, well, this is going to be a bit of fun, we're going to homeschool our child, I think at the end of, 15 weeks or whatever it is now, are just tearing their hair out. I mean, I've heard so many parents say, yeah, how do teachers do it? What a job they do. I mean, they are really acknowledging the professionalism of teachers and the role that teachers play and how tough a job it is, just to keep a child occupied, engaged, learning 6 or 7 hours a day. That is a hell of a feat.
Thank you very much for joining us, Sian. Always nice to connect with you. Sian Griffiths is the education editor at the Sunday Times, 18 minutes past 7.
Times Radio.
I'm Carol Walker, and I'll bring you a fresh take on the day's big stories and give you